Hey, 4C divers! Welcome to Facebook Live. Everybody say hi to Tarrant.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, you're just way too quiet. You need to pump it up a little.
It'll get there.
Okay, all right. Don't worry, guys. We have an action-packed presentation planned for you guys today. So let's do a check-in. Let's say hello. Give us a hello and where you're listening in from in the comments section. Give us a thumbs up, a smiley face, or a heart emoji to let us know you're enjoying tonight's presentation. All right, you know it is February, and in February, we actually themed it our travel month. So if you guys are interested in learning more about travel, make sure you go to our website and check out the landing page that we have there. It has lots of goodies about destinations where you can go, how to pack, a great blog about other things that you need to know before you travel and do dive destinations. So we also have some great Facebook Lives planned. So stay tuned for those. You can always go to the event tab and see what we have planned. We got someone talking about liveaboards, someone talking about Bonaire, and we're super excited to be able to bring you a little bit more travel since, COVID's lifted.
Slowly.
Yep, and so we were able to get out there and get some diving in some different destinations. So, and if you want to travel down here to South Florida, obviously we have 4C SCUBA. We can get you on a boat or doing a shore dive. We can get you some dive guides. If you want to get some instruction while you're down in this area, give us a call or email us and we will set you up for an adventure down here in South Florida. So Tarrant, look at all these people. They're all saying hello. Hi, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Some other things that we need to make sure that you are aware of whenever we do Facebook Lives. We like to reward you for watching and hanging out there and listening to us and learning from us. So go ahead and make sure before 6:45, go to our website, www.force-e.com, and go to the event tab. Make sure you go to tonight's presentation before 6:45 and register. That's when we pull the names and we put them in a random name picker. That way we can do a drawing. And tonight's drawing is a 10 airfill card.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
So if you want to win tonight, you need to make sure that you register. Yes, Greg, you know us. You work with us. Shout out to Greg. Greg, you did a fantastic presentation about regulators. So if you missed Greg's presentation, you can go to our YouTube channel. Any of these presentations, we download them. We put them on our YouTube channel. So if you ever miss our live presentation, go over to our YouTube channel and check out some of the cool topics we've done here in the past. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And we're going to bring it in. Tonight's topic, here we go. Tank talk.
All right.
No, not tank top. Not like a tank top.
I look great in those,
tank
by the way.
talk. Yeah, you look good.
Little hairy, but I look pretty good.
Anyways, so we are going to be talking about scuba cylinders, you guys, and we've got some history of cylinders. We have the maintenance, the care, the tank markings, all types of great little snacks to give you guys tonight. So let's go ahead and dig in. So the history, we always need to make sure that we know what we have seen in the past. So as divers, it's good to know the history of your dive equipment.
Absolutely.
Okay. So back in the day when the diving equipment wasn't what we have now, back in the 16th and 17th centuries, they had a mechanical aid to help you dive underwater, which was called a diving bell. They were rigged chambers lowered into the water, and they remained upright and the water in the water so that to sink, it would have the air. And so if you see this diagram right here, the person would come out of the bell with a little, I don't know, that looks like a bag, but it's some kind of a little helmet. Mm-hmm. And the guys would hold the hoses and get the air out of the bell. But then eventually they'd have to come back up. And they'd have to refill that bell. So that is the diving bells of back in the day. And moving outside of the bell, there was in 1772 a French inventor, and of course I'm going to butcher this. It was called the machine hydrostatique. Did I say that right? What do you think?
Pretty close.
Okay. It incorporated something like a modern dive suit combined with an air tank. So you see in the diagram there, basically you're in this little suit and had hoses that were supplied by an air tank that was moving along with you. And can you imagine trying to pull something like that behind you now?
No. I get upset with my scuba tanks at how heavy they are now. I couldn't imagine that.
Well, I think it's interesting because it's definitely taken a lot of like different, models and diagrams to make something happen. So let's go ahead and look at, after that funky contraption, you have dive helmets. So back in the day, the first person to really introduce a helmet was back in 1828, and that was John Dean's Patent Diving Press. So if you guys Google this, it's actually a pretty cool story. He figured out how to make this because there was these prize horses in a barn that was on fire, and they needed to get them out, but it was too hard because of all the smoke. So he put this thing over his head and figured out how to like supply air to it. I don't know the full thing. You just got to Google it. That's what I did to get this slide for you. Anyways, and so he ran in, saved these prize horses, and he said, okay. So then he started like patenting this stuff for using for firefighting, but then he's like, well, maybe I can take this underwater. So him and his brother produced the this helmet, not this particular one that you see in the picture. It's a different type. And they started, using that for recreational diving. Fun fact, in 1936, he and his brother produced probably the first diving manual.
Very cool.
Yeah. So, but let's go ahead and fast forward to the 1916, the Mark V helmet. Everybody has seen this. This is that really cool U.S. Navy dive helmet that everyone sees on, T-shirts and
there's what's not to love about that design. It's just beautiful.
Yep. And you see these in museums, and some people actually might have some in their house if you're a big collector of nautical things.
You can find them on certain old shipwrecks. I've actually seen some out in Bikini Atoll in Saratoga. So you can actually go find that one and the shallow water version of it there.
Awesome. So, it's interesting because I've been down to the History of Diving Museum that's down in the Keys. And if you go there, if you ever have a chance, you're going to see the evolution of just dive helmets at that museum and the way that they looked. They weren't as pretty as you see here. There's ones that literally looked like, it looked like a box on your head. Like it was so weird to see some of the models they had before they got to this pretty dive helmet. So, all right. So what do all of these things that I showed you guys have in common? Well, they were constant flow air supplies. So it wasn't easy for them to do dive planning. And also they didn't really understand that there was no decompression and stuff like that. So it was a little cumbersome to learn to do some recreational diving. They also relied on teamwork. You see in that picture there, you had to have a team that would keep you safe because there was so many different working parts. The other thing too is you had to rely on wearing heavy equipment. Take a look at the picture right there. You can see this guy's got these heavy dive boots on, this big suit with the rubbery gloves, and then that big heavy helmet. I'm not exactly sure how heavy those helmets were, but I was told that they're pretty heavy, and so it's very hard to move around in those. So can you imagine trying to swim? Most of the time you didn't swim. You were using these things to just walk on the floor and do your skills that you needed to do. So, all right. So let's go ahead and introduce scuba tanks. And go ahead, Taryn. What do you want to say about that?
So while the first scuba tanks were in use prior to 1945, the first patent that was placed was by Aqualung. In that year. Now, prior to that, they would use other things other than just the hardened steel tanks that you see in the picture. Some of the old pictures that we can find go all the way back to Mesopotamia, where they actually used organs of animals, and they would use that as a lung to breathe underwater. Obviously, we've evolved quite far from that and aren't using other creatures' lungs. They're made to be secure on your back, air supplied by the regulators that come from the tank through the tank valve. And then they are filled with compressed air or other compressed gases, such as nitrox or Trimix or other types of stuff like that. They're not just used for scuba. But this particular presentation, that's what we're going to be focusing on.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and get into the metals of scuba cylinders. So what came first?
Steel. Steel was the first one, and it was only authorized by commercial service back in the late 1971. After that, we started getting tanks made out of aluminum, and nowadays we're starting to see a little bit more with carbon fiber when it comes to rebreather tanks. The thickness and the weight of tanks are going to vary by the size, and that's going to, which I can kind of show you. So the different variants of sizes you have with, for instance, like an 80. It's going to be this one. So this is a high pressure 80 versus your standard 80. As you can see, the sizes are quite different. So they're going to hold the same amount of air, but they're going to have different amounts of pressure in them. Now, just because I have more pressure in my high pressure tank does not mean that I have more air in it. It's still an 80 cubic foot tank. All right. That's a common misconception that we get in the dive industry. They'd say, oh, well, this one is 3,500. It must hold more. No, not necessarily. All right. Some of the other cool things that we need to realize with these tanks, even though, like I said, they're both 80s, the weight is going to be different. So this one weighs 28 pounds, the high pressure, where my standard pressure one be 1.5 pounds. Now, that doesn't really make much of a difference, but where it does matter is in the water. So when we start hitting in that water, the steel tanks are not going to become positively buoyant typically when we're doing the dives, where the aluminum will. So the steel tank here in my left hand, that one's going to start off at -8 pounds, and it's going to work its way by the time it's empty to -1.5 pounds roughly. Whereas my aluminum tank is going to start off as a -1 to 2 pounds, and it'll end up when it's empty as a +4 pounds. So that's kind of where some people will start figuring out, do I want steel or do I want aluminum tank? The other difference that we can find here is a low pressure steel. Now, again, all of these are roughly 80. This is an 85, but as you can see, it's roughly the same size as my aluminum 80, where my high pressure steel 80 is much shorter. So those are going to be things that we need to think about while we're doing all this work and while we're thinking about everything else. So the other things that we need to look at are the aluminum tanks. Geez, this slide is so tiny for me. So the easy way to tell the difference between what metal you have, it's going to be real simple. Come back up to you. If you look on your tank itself, let me make sure I'm in the camera right. You can see right here we have 3AL. That AL is really simple. It's aluminum. All right. So that's a simple way to figure that out. And then the rest of this we're going to go over in just a little bit, but that's an easy way to tell whether you have an aluminum or a steel tank. The other ways are based on weight, but you can also do some of the tests that we'll figure out later, which are like a bell test. So when you're getting a visual done on your tank, one of the things that we'll do is called a bell test. So on an aluminum, doesn't sound like a bell, right? Real simple. Whereas a steel sounds like a bell. We're real creative with our names in the dive industry, so that's why we call it the bell test. But that's kind of the basics on the difference in the metals as far as that goes.
Okay, so let's talk about the shapes and the volumes. Sure. So we have steel cylinders that have the round bottoms,
such as this one right here. Get closer to y'all. So you can see down here we have that round bottom tank. That's why on a lot of steels, when people buy them, you'll see them get a boot with it, such as my high pressure 80 right here. Now, if we look at the bottom, you can kind of see down there that it is a rounded out bottom. That's why we put it in a boot. That way it doesn't fall over and crush our toes. Where aluminum tanks have a nice flat bottom. So it makes it easier for standing up, for storage, and stuff like that.
So what are the volume sizes that you see with these tanks?
Commonly, our volume sizes are going to be around an 80 cubic foot tank, which is your standard one that you probably used in class, which is this one. A highly sought after tank is a low pressure 85 in the tech world, just because of how it buoyancies out. when it gets empty. It doesn't change quite as much as some other tanks do. They also hold just a little bit more without having too much of a size difference between the two.
And how do you know what the volume of the tank is? How do you tell with the markings on your tank?
Really simple. So with that, there we are. So if you look on the tank itself, make sure y'all can see it. There you go. So it says S13, which this is going to give you a 13 cubic foot, where this one, we're going to spin you around. There you are. And make sure the camera can read that. So you can see down there in the bottom row, HP 80. That stands for high pressure 80. So that tells us that I have 80 cubic feet within that tank.
You know, we're really making you work out.
I know.
You know, you keep handing us
It's
all
a
these
good thing I
tanks.
didn't work out today.
All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the valves.
Sure.
All right, we've got a couple of valves here. In the late 1980s, the DIN valve was introduced to the U.S. from Europe, and they were used with cylinders rated above 3,000 psig. So that was the first valve to be created.
Yep.
And then after that, there was the K and the J valve. So K is the more popular one, especially in rentals and in dive boats. So Terrence, go ahead and tell everybody, why is it called a K valve?
Real cool story in my opinion. And I'm a bit of a history buff, so that's why I find it really interesting. So as it goes, apparently back in the day in the Sears catalog, they labeled everything A, B, C, D, blah, 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 kept on going through. Well, next to the K valve was the picture of this valve. So that's why we call it the K valve, where the J valve, which is this tank right here, the short little yellow one, was lettered J. Now, again, like I said, in the dive industry, we're real creative with our names, so we just kind of stuck with it, go, oh, that's the K valve, oh, that's the J valve. It's not because one looks like one letter or the other.
Okay, so what is the 300 bar valve?
That is this guy right here. So pretty simple. If you look right next to it, you can see kind of how deep that one is versus like a standard tank valve here, right? Now this one, in my opinion, is a big pain in the butt because I got to just keep on screwing in, taking it out. It takes a lot longer to put it back in and take it back out as far as my reg goes. I'm not able to use this with a Yoke tank. I can't put an insert inside of it or anything like that. I have to use just a DIN regulator. All right, so that's kind of a downside to it, in my opinion. The positive side is it's really screwed in there and it's not coming out. So that's a nice thing when it comes to that.
And can you show everybody that a DIN valve, you don't need to have the O-ring. There's no O-ring in the valve, okay?
The O-ring is actually on your SCUBA regulator,
Yep.
on your first stage.
And the K valve, you have the O-ring inside of the valve itself. So before you hook up to a regulator, you should always make sure that you have an O-ring and that it doesn't have any frays. And if it does, you got to change it out.
Sure.
All right. So the other question is the Pro valve.
The Pro valve, so that's the J valve. We're going to take that one down. So the cool thing about the Pro valve is that I can use it as a DIN or a Yoke tank. So with this one, what I can do here is you can see it's already set up for a DIN tank. Now, if I needed it to then become a Yoke tank, not a big deal. I just slide the insert in and then screw it in with an Allen key. And just like that, I'm ready to go diving with a Yoke regulator. Doesn't make much of a difference. Doesn't upset anybody being able to pop it in and out. It can be used for a high pressure or a low pressure tank, either or. It's just as simple as just popping in the right size Allen key and taking out the DIN insert. Voila.
And then tell them about the
indicator valves. So what's kind of cool about them, if you're sometimes forgetful like I am, you want to make sure just by a quick glance, like, okay, yes, I have my air on. Obviously, you can take a couple breaths off your regulator as well, but if it's just sitting there, you can look at it. It makes it easy for us when we're working on tanks to know that, oh, that one's fully drained because it's now showing green and there's no air coming out of it, versus Now it's showing red. That tells me that the tank is closed. So it's just a nice, quick, easy way to look at it to be able to pop it on, pop it off.
Okay, you guys probably want to know, all right, this is the age-old question when you get trained to be a scuba diver. Have you ever heard of when the instructor goes, okay, turn your tank valve on all the way till it stops and then give it a quarter turn back? Everyone's heard that, but then you've also heard instructors that say, turn the valve all the way on and don't do the quarter turn back. Taryn, what is the correct answer?
We're still arguing about that. That's
right.
like saying, do you roll a tank or do you not roll a tank?
Yep. So guys, back in the day, that was the way they taught it. Nowadays, the valves are so much better, the way that they're made. And so you don't need to necessarily do a quarter turn back on itself. But if you're used to doing it, go ahead and do it. All right.
From my understanding, what it was, they were trying to save the Teflon O-ring in the back because people would He-Man it open and then they wouldn't know. And then to try and keep and save that Teflon O-ring, because divers, we want to make our stuff last as long as possible, they back it off just a hair to try and keep it from getting dug into. But if you ask me, if you've already yacked it open, you've already done the damage.
Okay. All right. The maintenance on the valves.
Maintenance, real simple. What a lot of people actually forget to do during their rinse off, they will forget to rinse off the valve itself, especially if they're own tanks. Some people will forget to rinse inside of here or inside the actual valve itself. Salt water gets in there, it crystallizes, it gets all kinds of nasty. Sometimes when you feel it when you're opening up your tank, it gets kind of crunchy. That's not a good thing. We want it to be a smooth turn. So easy things to do in there is just make sure we're rinsing out the back of the valve, the front of the valve, spraying it all off, just trying to get that salt water off of it. Other things you can do is every once in a while, if they start getting real bad, you can bring them in. We'll make them all pretty and clean for you again. We do have a tank valve service. Basically, what we do is we break open the valve, tear it all apart, replace all the innards that need to be replaced, and then put it back together.
Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. Working pressures. So the difference between the aluminum working pressure and the steel.
So a steel working pressure is going to be 3442. We'll tell everybody that's 3,500. That's just because it's an easier number to remember than the 3442 located right there. Now, typically we're not supposed to overfill, but we do in the dive industry. We just make it up to about a 10% over that, just so that we know it cools down to the appropriate pressure. Where most aluminum tanks are, or excuse me, all aluminum tanks are going to be 3,000 psi. So that one's going to be located right there next to the 3AL. Then it has 3,000. Steel tanks, that's other than the 3442. Something fun that you'll find on those is you'll find what we call low pressures, which I've already touched on a little bit. So the low pressure tanks like this LP85 here, that one is going to only be filled up to 2,400 psi. Now, there are other ones out there that are filled to 2,670 some odd. I don't remember exactly what that one is. And then there's other ones as well, but typically it's 2,400. A lot of cave divers will like these tanks, and then they try to crank them all the way up to a high pressure fill because they feel like they're getting extra gas in it. Now, we don't do that, but there are plenty of places in cave country that do. But so that's kind of the fill pressures there. Now, the difference is, like I've already touched on, you're still getting your 80 cubic feet, whether it's a low pressure or a high pressure or a standard pressure. It's all going to change the size of the tank itself.
Okay, and we did show you where to look for those tank markings. So let's go ahead and look at other markings that we should be aware of.
Sure. So we have the DOT, which stands for Department of Transportation. That one is going to be right next to that 3AL on your aluminum one right here. Now, some older tanks are also going to be stamped with a Canadian one. I forget what it actually stood for, but I know it's got a C in it, and I don't remember what the rest of the letters were. But it's right next to that same DOT stamp. Some of the other stuff we're going to be looking for as well is going to be the birth date. Now, that's going to be important for your older scuba tanks, especially your aluminums. If they're older than I am, 30 years old, depending on who made it, we might not fill it, and that's just for a safety feature. They were, back in the day, they were kind of using some of the less quality aluminum alloys. So we've learned from those mistakes because some of them have had problems in the past. So because of that, we just don't fill those at 4C anymore. But if they're born within, less than 30 years ago, you're pretty much okay. But every 5 years, you need to check this stamp right here, which is called the hydrostatic test. That one's going to be next to your size. So the 13 right next to that is going to be your hydrostatic test. What that's going to do is you want that to be within 5 years of the current day. If you're over 5 years, what you need to get is called a hydrostatic test. It's real simple. You come drop it off at our dive shop. We take care of the rest. And now what that is we're going to take it off to get tested. They're going to cram a bunch of water into it to about 5,000 some odd PSI. And they're going to let it expand. Now, when they relieve the pressure, they want that to come back down and stay within a certain percentage of what its original size was. If it explodes or if it has a hole or something like that, obviously it fails because it's no longer going to hold gas.
Okay. And then the other thing to check is that serial number. And guys, the reason why we want to do that is not just because each tank has its own serial number, but you want to record that, like maybe in your logbook or in something that you put into a safe, because there is times that people steal tanks. You've heard it happen. People get them stolen out of their garages, and then they end up in the pawn shop. And if you have your serial numbers and you have proof that you own these, you can get them back. So that's why we record serial numbers. And where is it on here?
So this one, for instance, is going to be located. Of course, you got me with a tall tank. Right next to the aluminum 3000. Let's tilt that over there. So right here, now that one's going to be listed off as CC641331. Now, the CC stands for what they made it out of and the size. Depending on the manufacturer, they're going to have a different number in the beginning. For instance, an aluminum 100 made by Catalina has a double A in front of it, whereas it can be confusing if you use a low-pressure steel because they mark those with a double A as well.
Okay. Do any of these tanks have visual stickers on them?
They do not. These are all for sail tanks.
Oh, well, of course we didn't grab one with a visual sticker, but it's not actually a marking, but a sticker that also goes onto your tank is that visual sticker. So, Taryn, tell everybody what that is.
Basically, with the visual, what we're going to do, we're going to bring in the tank, we're going to drain it out, we're going to look inside. If it's a steel tank, we're going to be making sure that it doesn't have any rust or pitting or anything like that, mainly because it's going to be affecting the thickness of the wall, and obviously, for safety reasons, we want that wall to remain the same thickness. The other things we're going to be checking for is discolorations. Now, what discolorations can show us is if bad air got into it, if oil got into it, or some other substance got in there and discolored the sides. They should be clean relatively. If we see streaking or something like that, that can lead us to believe something else got in there, whether it be moisture or something a little bit more dangerous to our health.
Something to look for. If you get moisture into a steel tank, what are you going to see?
You're going to see streaks. It's going to look like a glass that you didn't wipe clean. It's going to have these running lines, and you can also get rust in it as well. Sometimes rust does happen after a hydrostatic test, especially your first one. That's just a flash rust. That is something that we are aware of and we look at. But if you get a whole bunch inside, what we can do is send it out for a tumble, and they put a medium inside of it, and they tumble the tank, and they clean it back out again.
Another thing about the visual is we don't like to have all these accessories on them because we got to check the pits on the outside. So if you do have any accessories on your tanks, make sure that you remove them. And sometimes, unfortunately, we have to remove stickers if they're there because stickers can paint. Mm-hmm.
So what we have to worry about with that is if I see on your sticker and it's a little bumpy, or if it looks like something's underneath it, I have to scrape it away to make sure that it's just surface and not actually affecting the sidewalls of the tank. So other things I'm going to look at for some of the older tanks, especially if they're painted, they're going to get this bubble look to them. I'm going to sit there with a scraper and I'm going to scrape it all off and make sure that it's not affecting the actual metal of the tank and it's just affecting the paint.
And guys, like he said before with the valves, you want to make sure that you're cleaning your tanks after you use them. That salt water can get onto that paint and start corroding your tanks. So fresh water, fresh water, fresh water. If you watched our regulator presentation, you guys learned that fresh water is the key to cleaning your tanks. We had a question. Is there any kind of soaps you can use on the tanks?
I don't. I've always just used fresh water. I'm sure there are some. I've always just used, like, if anything, I would use a mild detergent like a Joy dish soap or Dawn or something like that. But nothing real strong or too potent on there. I always just use a hose water and let it soak.
Mm-hmm. And then also, when we're talking about the care and maintenance of them, when we store them, if we're not going to be using them for a while, how should we store them?
We want them stored with some gas in there. If you want to, store it fully sealed, you can. But leaving them empty and open to, the moisture that's in the air, especially down here in Florida, that's not something that's going to be really good for the inside of the tank. So you want to store it with, about 500 psi in there if you want. But by all means, have something in it, because just empty is not going to be very good for your tank.
And as Sam pointed out, sometimes we get visuals and little critters can get into your tank.
Oh,
so
yeah.
you'd be surprised.
I found lizards. I found spiders. Yeah, there's some weird things you'll get inside of a tank.
And then as far as storing them, should they be vertical or should you lay them flat?
I store mine vertical, just because of space. That's the way I usually do it. It also allows, if there's any moisture, it's going to pool at the bottom, which is where the thickest of the tank is going to be. I don't like storing mine on the sides, just in case something did get in there as far as liquid or something like that. It's going to affect more of my tank and more surface area.
Yep. And transporting your tanks. If you're in the car, should you transport them with the valves towards the driver or behind the driver?
I have heard arguments both ways. I like, personally, my tanks away from the driver, the valves pointing away from the driver. Two reasons. One, it's easier to grab when I'm getting back out, when I'm grabbing my tanks out of my car. I'm a little lazy, so I want to just be able to grab it easily, not have to finagle with it. The second reason is I figure if I get rear-ended, it's just a little bit extra boost to get me further down 95.
Sam, you've got great insight. So they want to know, is it okay for me to keep my tanks at, say, the dive shop, 4C? Well, here at 4C, we do not like to store your tanks. So
not for long periods of time.
Nope. We have lots of customers, and especially the boats. It's really hard to store your tanks at the dive shop. So please, you need to take them with you, and especially after we've called you, after you've had the hydrostat done.
Mm-hmm.
You need to come get those tanks. All right, so let's go ahead on to our next slide. 1 second, I gotta go back over. There it is. Okay. And we need to talk about the gas stickers.
Sure. So you can get different stickers placed onto your tanks, as you can see in the picture there. That one's marked enriched air, obviously for nitrox. You can get ones that are going to mark as trimix. I've seen stickers for argon gas, and I've also seen stickers that mark a tank for non-breathing or non-scuba. Typically, those people are using those to refill their air rifles or their paintball guns or something like that. But we need to know, or you need to know rather, what is in your tank. It can be something as simple as a piece of tape, and you wrote down your percentage and the date so that that's, I've been diving since that date. Obviously, I need to refill my tank. That's another easy way to check that. But the other thing is, I need to know what tanks are empty, what tanks are full, what tanks have what in them.
Yep. And like he said before, the difference in tanks. So we also can fill the paintball gun tanks.
If we have the right attachments.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And also we can do the O2 tanks.
Correct.
So if you have an O2 kit that you keep on your boat, we can do that for you. Now, what's interesting about these types of tanks is they are designed, their valves, so that a scuba regulator cannot fit onto their valves. And they do that so that you're not going diving with a 100% O2 bottle, because obviously that is toxic to dive with. So that's why they have different attachments. So come into 4C, we'll make sure we have that right attachment for you. Here's what I was talking about. Here's a O2 bottle. See, it doesn't have the same attachment as a scuba regulator. No, I'm sorry, a scuba valve.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So guys, we talked about getting visuals done. So right now we released this morning. It is our Valentine's Day. Fall in love with our 4C offer. It's our BOGO on visuals. One visual inspection on your tank, get the second one free. Woo! All right. So If you guys go and check your tanks out after the presentation, you realize you need to get a visual, come on down. You have until today and till the 16th in stores, and we will go ahead and honor the one, and you get the second one for free. So, and then also if you have twins, we can do that. They're going to be half off. Okay.
Which the same.
All right, where are we on the slides? Here we go. Okay, so let's talk about the accessories.
Sure.
All right, there's lots of different accessories that you can put onto your tanks. Some are necessary and some are not. So we're going to go through a couple of these things. First is the tank boot.
Tank boot we've already touched on. This one's for the steel one yet again. And you can see because it has the rounded bottom, that's why we want the boot. That way it stands up straight instead of just falling over like this one would. All right. Some other parts that we're going to look into, you can get aluminum tanks. We'll have a boot for them. The one I personally like is the octagonal one. That way it doesn't roll around as much in my car. It still does roll a little bit. But with that boot on there, it does help keep it from rolling around too much around. Other things we're going to look at are the tank valve caps. Great thing about these are, especially if you drop them off at 4C and you want us to do like a VIP or a fill and you're going to come pick them up later that day. Sometimes you grab those bright colored ones, like a bright orange or a bright green. It's easier to find than if you just have the black caps, because everybody grabs the black caps. So this one makes it a little bit easier just to find, oh, I have orange caps on it. Boom, there are my tanks. So I use those kind of as a identifier for my tanks as well. They also are a nice way to tell whether your tank is full or empty.
Yeah, so you always want to keep the cap off after you're done diving, put the cap on after you get your fill.
Yep. That way it's just quick and easy way to go, okay, that one's full, ideally.
Especially when you're on a boat and you got your two tanks sitting next to each other. If you keep that cap off, you know that that's the one you just did the dive with.
Exactly.
All right.
Then you got tank handles. The tank handles are going to loop around, not a rebreather bottle like this one, but it's going to go around the neck of one of the tanks. It makes it easier to hold, so you can kind of hold that without having to grab it by the valve itself.
Do you want to talk about how to hold a handle?
Sure.
I mean, hold the valve.
the way that it was drilled into me when I was first getting trained up and being a dive master and all that fun stuff is to always hold the valve back so that the valve is pointing away from the palm of your hand for two reasons. One, now if my hand slips, I'm constantly closing this valve. I'm not ever going to accidentally open it up. Like if I was holding it this way, that's how the valve opens. All right?
Also, be advised, always make sure that you have this end and not just holding here, right, because you can bend the stem that's in that valve.
Correct. Recently, we've had a couple of them come in with bent or broken stems, and that was usually the cause of people holding it like this and just carrying it that way. Now, yes, a little 13 like this one doesn't weigh that much, but if we start getting the 133 that I pulled out over there, that's a pretty heavy tank, and that's going to be held up by this small little piece of metal. You're going to bend it, and it's going to end up getting hurt. So that's one thing that we want to carry that. The other reason is, again, obviously I'm not going to cut it on, but if I carry it this way, technically speaking, if I cut that air on, it could send the air through my skin because it's porous. And then we have to worry about air embolisms and fun stuff like that.
We don't want that. So make sure you're carrying those cuffs. Or
cuffs?
Cuffs. I just read what Andrew Perry wrote. I was like, cuffs. Make sure you're carrying those tanks correctly. Another thing is tank nets. Those are a hot topic.
I personally don't like them. I do understand why people get them. They think that they're going to protect the outside of the tank, and it's going to keep, especially if it's a painted tank, it's going to keep it nice and pretty. I understand all that.
It also allows the tank band on your BCD to stay put.
Right.
So it doesn't slip. What
I don't like about it is it tends to fall apart. Then when I have to do a VIP on it and pull it off, it ends up breaking under my hands. Then I feel bad because I just damaged somebody else's stuff. But the other thing it does is it will trap a lot of water next to the tank, which then causes more corrosion on you to that paint that you are trying so hard typically to protect.
Okay. And then there's different types of tank holders. Obviously, when you're on a boat, the boat provides tank holders, and they always say, bungee, bungee, bungee. You got to bungee those tanks in because you do not want those things falling, hitting the deck, either hitting your foot or the deck and either hurting yourself.
It's 30 pounds dropping right onto your foot.
Absolutely. I don't want that dropping on my foot. I don't want it dropping on my buddy's foot. Right. And I also don't want to put a hole into the boat where I have to pay for it.
No.
So make sure you got those bungees on when you go diving. But say you're for your car, you need a tank holder. Those ones that we have a picture of right here, they're the PVC pipes. Those are really nice. You can lay the tank right down and they don't shift around and knock in the back of your car.
Right. And you can also get ones for different sizes. If you needed smaller ones or bigger ones, you can adjust it ever so slightly to make it fit the tank, because a 133 versus an 80 is not going to be the same diameter. So you might need a little bit bigger of a gap.
Okay. All right. So these are some questions to ask when it comes to if you're ready to start using tanks, if you want to use your own versus rentals. So is it the right time to buy your own tanks or use rentals? That question is always something that comes up, especially with newer divers, because, you know, they're trying to figure out, you know, do I purchase these things or do I rent them for a while? Because I'm not sure what size I like. I'm not sure what I need. So we're going to go ahead and go through that question.
Yep. So usually what I tell people when they ask me that question, I tell them to go ahead and rent different sizes for a second, because you do need to figure out which one is better for your size. For instance, I can do certain dives with an 80 where other people might need to use a 100 cubic foot tank. Maybe they use a little bit more air or something like that, so they need just a little bit extra. So then it boils down as well, how often am I diving? You know, aluminum tank for an 80 is basically $200. So if I'm renting it up and using it enough, does it make sense for me to buy a tank? So that's one big thing that people need to think about when they're going to go into buying these things, as well as thinking about, okay, every year I have to do a VIP. You know, am I going to be doing it that often enough to make it worth it? Some people will just say, no, we're just going to do, 10 dives a year. Okay. And, buying a tank at that point almost doesn't make sense as far as your wallet goes. Now, if I'm doing a bunch of dives in a year, but they're all travel dives and I'm hopping on an airplane, obviously, no, that doesn't make any sense. If I'm doing rebreather dives, yes, I'm going to want to have my own little 3-liter or 2-liter bottles, whichever one I decide on. Same with tech dives with your doubles. I like having my own doubles. I don't want to try and hope that a dive shop has doubles for me, because not every dive shop out there does.
Okay. And how many tanks do you think I need? Well, if you're Tarrant.
Yeah, 7.
If you're Tarrant, he needs 7.
I have 2 LP85s, 2 3-liter tanks. I have a 72, 2 40s, and an 80 floating around somewhere. Oh, and 2 steel 120s. Roggy has those.
So obviously, if you're not into technical diving or cave diving like Taryn is, and you're just doing recreational dives, 2 tanks is usually what you need.
Right.
Sometimes if you think you're going to be doing deeper dives, having that little spare air tank is another purchase you might want to consider.
Or even just getting a smaller tank. Like I said, I have a 40. When I was guiding out in the Pacific, that's what I used a lot. I would just sling it onto my side. So if a guest ran out of air, I had a whole separate tank for them to use. I didn't have to really worry about the buddy breathing system or anything like that. And to me, it was just a little bit easier so that I could focus on everybody and not be tied to just one diver. So that could also be another option for people.
Yeah. And also, I know you kind of touched on this, but what tank size is right for you, aluminum or steel?
So that one you'll kind of learn as you do a couple dives. If you're a real big, heavy breather, maybe you'd use the 100 cubic foot tank or the 133 or something like that. If you use a lot of lead and you're just trying to get some of that weight off your hips and back, or not back, but off your hips and out of your BC and stuff, sure, let's go with the steel tank. That's going to give me a little bit of extra weight where I don't have to put it in my weight pockets or my trim pockets, or if I'm old school, my weight belt. So that'll allow for that to work really well, depending on where I'm going with it. For instance, we got people like Jeff works the bridge, and he uses a little, it's smaller than 80. I think it's a little 63 or something like that. And he goes and dives the bridge with that, where when he dives offshore, he's using a bigger tank. He's using, I think their steel 100 is what he's using for those. So depending on what type of diving you're doing depends on what you're going to do and what type of tank you're going to use.
Okay, and questions. Guys, it's now the time to ask your questions. If you have anything that you want Tarrant or myself to answer. Andrew Perry, by the way, that was so funny. And he's over here laughing at me because I read his cough. All right. So another question that came in was, what's the best way to clean a DIN valve?
Rinse it, and then you want to blast the air, or excuse me, blast the water out of it before storing it so that it doesn't either cram that down into your regulator or so it doesn't sit inside the valve itself, causing other types of corrosion.
Okay. The other one is they'd like you to talk about when you're filling a tank, filling it in water or out of water.
So we fill them in water here. I normally work in the Riviera store, so we fill them in water up there, especially because we're getting a lot of tanks. There are times where we're doing 200 tanks in a day, and in order for us to be able to do it in a timely manner, we're using chilled water. Now, what that's going to do is going to chill down my tank so that as it heats, or excuse me, as the tank gets filled, it does slowly heat up. This cold water is going to try to counteract that so that I can still fill it at a decent rate without worrying about over or hot filling your tank and not getting you a proper fill. One of the things that we realized as well is with every degree Fahrenheit that your tank increases, 5 PSI is increased within inside the tank. So we need to make sure that we're taking that into account.
Okay. And also when we're, operating a fill station, as a 4C employer, any fill station operator, we do have certifications that we do. So, and is that only for if you work in the dive industry, or is that class offered for, anybody who wants to learn?
It's, as far as I know, it's anybody. You take it through the dive industry. I'm pretty sure it's PSI, PCI is one of the agencies out there. They can do one. You don't have to be a scuba instructor. They use it for firefighters and stuff like that as well. So they'll teach them how to maintain their tanks because they'll be using similar tanks to us.
Yep. And if you want more information about taking one of those classes, you can come into 4C. We have a couple instructors that teach that. And we're actually going to be doing a class soon because we just had a few new hires because we now have a new store coming, you guys. If you did not watch What's Happening Facebook Live back in January, we announced we have a 4th store coming. It's in Boynton Beach. It is not open yet, guys. Soon. Very, very, very soon. It is getting there, but we hope to be opening in the real near future. So, if you're thinking about going down there and checking it out right now, please stay away. The guys are frantically trying to get that thing.
There.
Yeah,
we're getting there.
They're trying to get that thing stocked and painted and everything in place so that we can open. So when you come down and distract us, we don't get our work done. But so we're really excited to be able to offer a 4th store in the Boynton Beach area. So make sure you guys are on our newsletter so that you'll get the update when that store is open and is ready to come in and shop. Some other questions that are coming in, they're talking about storing tanks again. So a couple of them are like, how long can you store a tank with nitrox in it?
I've had one tank come in. It was, we had it actually last week. It was 10 years old and the air smelled. For the longest time, I was like, no, air doesn't go stale. No, it had a smell to it, and it definitely did. So, I mean, I wouldn't store for more than a couple months personally. But you want something sitting in there. Like I said earlier, you want to make sure that the gas in there is higher than the ambient pressure, just so we're not getting moisture and whatnot from outside getting in there.
And say you have had it sitting there for about 6 months and you want to come in and get it filled, and it still has its hydro and its visual. It's all still good. It's just that air's been in there for a while. You don't want to breathe that air. We can just drain it really quick and then fill it.
Yeah. It doesn't take us that long to do that.
Nope. We've actually got these really cool things we made with regulators that have like a silencing.
That's at the Boca shop. They got those.
They have them here. at Pompano. We're in Pompano. If you guys didn't notice, this is my background, the dive flag. But anyway, so we can drain those real quickly and then fill them for you. And again, just so everyone's clear, we do not store tanks at the store for you. We're sorry. We just don't have the space for it. So please, when you get them filled, you got to take them home with you.
If you're getting service done, like if you're dropping off a VIP and you're saying, hey, I'm going to pick it up tomorrow, that's normal. We get that often.
Yeah.
But what we're not looking is to store it for months at a time.
And then talking another about transportation, we talked about in the back of your car, but someone's asking, what about in the floorboard of the vehicle if it sits behind the driver's seat? Again, you got to make sure that it's secure. You know, you also want to make sure that you're not storing it. You know, if you're here in South Florida and it gets really hot over the summers, Taryn, tell us a little bit about that.
So what can happen again, like we were just stating. So let's say we make our water at Riviera store, I think it's like 44 degrees Fahrenheit. If I fill your tank to a low pressure of 2,700 and I fill it up and then I let it sit there and get down to that temperature, by the time it comes to room temperature, I've added additional 300 PSI on top of it. Then outside your car, you know, it can get plus 100 degrees inside your car. Well, okay, great. I'm adding another couple hundred PSI on there. Every degree Fahrenheit is I believe it's between 3 and 5 PSI for every degree that it goes up or down, obviously. So for that reason, I wouldn't store it in the car. If it goes off, hopefully the burst valve goes first. But that's still a lot of pressure. These tanks, when they're like an aluminum 80, for instance, when it's at 3,000 PSI, it's got about the same explosive power as 2 hand grenades. It's not something really to play around with. So if you can, yes, absolutely take it out of your car for long periods of time. Don't let it just sitting there in the back, just rolling around and stuff.
And you did touch on burst disc. We actually didn't even put that in our presentation because we were talking more about the tanks, but we'll go ahead and answer this question that just came in. Do you ever need to replace a functioning burst disc on a cylinder that has never been filled beyond capacity?
If it's looking fine, it's fine. If it's if it's badly corroded, like I've had this happen, the guy came in, I popped off his burst valve and it was pretty badly corroded. No, I replaced it. I'm not going to try to clean that up. I'm not going to try to that's a safety thing. It gets chucked and I put in a new one. If it's fine and your valve still looks, brand new, squeaky clean, sure. You can keep going. But if it starts looking bad, if it starts looking like it's chewed up and corroded really badly, no, it needs to be replaced. It's safety, guys.
You know what? Go ahead and explain what is actually the burst disc and the function of it, because we didn't put it in the slides. Sorry, guys.
Right, so we got the burst disc right here. And if you look real closely, you'll see these 2 little holes. So when it gets overfilled, what happens is inside there's a little metal cap. It blows. Now, ideally, this is a safe way for it to break, and it's going to sit there and it's going to spin like a top. Now, if you ever come across this and you see it spin like a top, let it go. Let it go until it finishes and, is no longer angry and sitting there spinning anymore. If you do try to stop it, I can almost promise you it's going to hurt. I actually had one burst disc at the first dive shop I ever worked at blow, and I was about 2 feet from it. I couldn't stand up straight. I couldn't see straight for about an hour. I had ringing in my ears for about 3 hours, and it sat there and spun like a top, and I just got the heck out of Dodge. The dive shop owner luckily called, and what I thought was a whisper on the phone turned out to be me yelling, and I told him that a burst disc went in my ear, and he appeared and took over for a while. But yeah, no, it's not something really to play around with, and when they go, there's no real warning. They just off they go. And if you're, inside of a car or something like that, that's a lot of pressure. It can cause damage to your car.
Another thing is if you are draining them fast or if they burst, they do get cold.
Yes, they get very cold.
So what's the mechanics behind that?
They can actually get ice on them. Basically, it's the air whipping out of them so fast that they'll build up ice on top of them. That's why when you see us, if we have our tank or if we have tanks draining outside of one of our shops, we're letting it slowly drain. We're not just cranking it open as fast as we can for a couple reasons. One, we don't want that air going out so fast that it could fall over and then become a projectile. But also because at that time, if I let it go too fast, I'm building moisture. which then gets inside the tank, which is not what we want. That's kind of the main reason behind the VIPs and everything else that we're doing. We're trying to make sure that there's no moisture getting inside these things.
Okay, so now as you're talking about this, it reminded me of a movie that's in Hollywood. I think it's called Fool's Gold.
Yes.
Yes.
It's a great one.
Is that the Jessica Alba one? No.
Yes, it is.
It is?
Yes.
Or no, Into the Blue. It's Jessica Alba.
Either way, they're both great.
Is Matthew McConaughey and Kate Hudson. Right. So Into the Blue with the cute guy.
You lost me.
I know. Anyways, Jessica Alba. Yes. So if you ever watch that movie, you'll see they take the valves and he goes down with his tank and he goes like that. He takes a crack.
You can do that.
It. You can, but what's going to happen?
You're most likely going to get water in your tank.
You're not going to get water. You might knock your teeth out.
That too, if you open it too fast.
Yeah. So guys, please don't try that at home. That is not something Hollywood should have taught everybody. No. All right. Another thing, go ahead and show everybody the valve again. Mm-hmm. All right. So obviously this is what it looks like when it's on your tank, right? But then inside you've got your thread and you have the stem here.
The snorkel.
And then this is called a snorkel. Oh, sorry. This is the stem. This is the snorkel. Mm-hmm. This is why Terrence here. Okay, remember I'm the social media girl, not the staff member that knows everything. All right, move over. So they also have an O-ring here, and the reason why I'm bringing this up, guys, is because this can actually get pinched.
Yes, it gets pinched. Sometimes we'll get them, especially if people breathe their tanks down all the way to zero. This will come in and it will be completely corroded and encrusted in salt. Now, what that tells me when I pop it open is that there's now salt water that somehow got into your tank, most likely from people breathing it down to zero. Especially depending on how deep you are, depends on the pressure and all that fun stuff. But with this O-ring, what we do is we swap it out every time you get a VIP. We pull that off, put on a new one, and we lube it up just to make sure that it stays nice and it doesn't get wedged in there too badly. But what some people do is when people overfill it, you can break these. They can sometimes come out of the sides if they're not pressurized properly or if they get pinched when putting in. So that's something that we are aware of as we're putting the valve back inside the tank. We're making sure that it's setting properly and isn't coming off all funny.
Awesome. All right. So guys, I think we answered everyone's questions. So you know what time it is. It is time to do our raffle. So let me go ahead and bring that on over. Here we go, and let's make it big. Okay, guys, so the raffle tonight is we're raffling off 10 airfill card.
Very nice.
Okay, you can use that airfill card at any of the locations. Okay, so let's go ahead. There's everyone's names, and Scott, you are our big winner tonight. If you are listening in, give us a woo woo in the comments section. Congratulations, and it's time to get your tanks filled and let's go diving, right?
Absolutely.
All right, well, everybody, if you want more information about tanks, you can go and talk to Terrence. He's at our Riviera store, or any of the stores have some great staff members that are knowledgeable with tanks. And if you want to take a class about visuals, you can go ahead and get in contact with us as well. Mm-hmm. And guys, thanks a lot for listening tonight.
Jesus.
I don't see anybody laughing.
No.
I actually stole that from Pavel. He said, thanks a lot for the info.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, I know.
Y'all been hanging out with Jordan too much.
I know. Well, guys, we love you. Thanks for tuning in and hope you have a great night. See ya.
Bye.